From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you, and ahead today out of Oklahoma State University, Derrell with his latest observations on the cattle market trends. Among other things, he'll comment on a just-announced agreement by a major China retailer to purchase beef from a U.S. source. Then K-State's John Gonzalez and Stephanie Davis report on their study of pork products from hogs which were fed a specific diet to increase the omega-3 content of the pork cut. They assessed the impact on the quality of the final product. And on this week's 4-H segment, Dickinson County 4-H agent Jill Martinson talks about the successes of the 4-H Spin Club initiative in that county. All this and more right here on Agriculture Today.
Agriculture and food systems are the main drivers of the Kansas economy, but must be improved in order to feed the world's growing population. How are we going to do so? Reduce food loss, find ways to preserve grasslands, and help families stretch their dollars. Global food systems is one of the 5 grand challenges K-State Research and Extension is addressing. To learn more, visit www.ksre.ksu.edu.
To the cattle markets we go. Derrell is on the line with us once again. Derrell, as you well know, is a livestock economist out of Oklahoma State University. We'll glance back at the trade trends last week and some other items, particularly on the beef trade side. But as we recap the market action last week, Derrell, it's still fairly healthy, this market, although there was a notable fall-off on Friday in the futures trade.
Yeah, I think we're seeing some short-term tops in this market. The futures market, as well as the cash market, at least for fed cattle, both look like they've probably put in a little bit of a top. Now, that's sort of the bad news, I guess, is that we probably are coming down off of those highs a little bit. The good news is I think we got higher than we ever expected to be before that happened. So we're still in pretty good shape, but it does look like this thing has turned around just a little bit.
And the hope is that this is not the peak, that we won't see this market hit reverse gear anytime soon.
Well, again, on the cash market, I think, we probably will pull back a little bit from these recent highs, but we're still in the, pretty strong fourth quarter seasonal mode. And then as we move into the first part of next year, we would look for additional seasonal strength in this market. So, I don't see this as a major change in trend. The futures market, frankly, has been stronger than I expected for quite some time, and it's pushed higher recently, even more so. So again, I'm not too surprised to see it pull back a little bit, but this may be just a relatively small technical correction. I think it's way too early to see whether we see sort of a fundamental change here in this market, in terms of liquidating the long position that's out there right now.
And specifically to the feeder cattle trade, looking at the auctions, by and large, there seems to be still a favorable tone to those prices.
Well, again, I think it's been a surprising fall. We didn't see a lot of seasonal downtrend in prices. They dropped very little through September and most of October, and then recently they actually have gone back up. Again, that's probably defying the odds. I don't expect that to continue. We may still yet see a little bit of seasonal pressure, although we're already well into November, and usually those lows are in before Thanksgiving. So I think we're, again, holding at a level that's probably a little higher than anybody expected, and I don't expect it to keep going up, but I don't really see necessarily any serious weakness imminent in this market.
Have to ask you, you've had rain down in your neck of the woods in Oklahoma. We have interest in what's happening with wheat pasture cattle demand. Have we seen that start to tick up a bit?
Well, I've actually traveled across much of central and western Oklahoma in the last week or two, and as you look out there, most of the wheat is up, but a lot of it is still very small. I don't see a lot of cattle out on wheat, stockers on wheat. A few cows are out on wheat in some cases, but I think the stocker cattle, though, are out there. I think we've had good forage this fall, both in quantity and quality, really, because of those late summer and fall rains that we had, and obviously the prices would suggest there's been demand for these stocker cattle. I think what producers have done is kind of stockpile these calves and put them on other forage. They're not so much out on wheat yet, but it's coming on. And to your point that the conditions are there, the wheat looks like it will develop pretty quickly. So I think the cattle are being, obviously being received and going through that process, but they're on other forages right now until the wheat's ready.
So you're saying that the stockers for wheat pasture purposes have been secured. We likely won't see any kind of bump at the local auctions to that effect.
I don't know that we have enough bump to take it even higher yet. And again, we're late enough now that we probably won't see the bulk of the fall low kind of seasonal pressure. The volumes have been bigger than last year, consistent with the idea that we have a bigger calf crop out there. I think we've run many of those cattle through the auctions here recently. So the short answer is I think there's still a bit more demand that will keep this market in pretty good shape.
All right. Do want to give a nod here, Derrell, to the USDA's crop production report. It came out this past Thursday, and among the many indicators from those numbers, there's a healthy corn crop out there, surprisingly so to some in terms of the average yield that the USDA was calling for. All of it suggested that corn prices may well remain suppressed for some time. And that does have to be an ongoing positive for the cattle sector, and particularly feeding returns.
Absolutely. We do anticipate that we're going to continue to see very favorable cost of gain at the feedlot level. Feedlots have a tremendous incentive to be feeding something. And one of the things that we're always interested in then is sort of what are they going to feed? How are they going to feed them? And, one of the concerns of cheap corn or cheap feed is that we could get into a situation where we overfeed cattle and create weight problems on top of bigger numbers. That's not happening right now. As we well know, the carcass weights are seasonally peaking right now, but they're well below year-ago levels. Feedlots have continued to move these cattle, and that's what's important here is not only do we have this favorable cost of gain, but we also have the right incentives at this point in time for the feedlots to continue turning those animals over quickly. So they're feeding and reloading with lightweight cattle, but moving them out in a very timely way on the back end and not creating additional problems that way.
Well, let's look at the USDA's latest report on beef exports. And the general appearance of those numbers is that they're in keeping with the ongoing friendly nature of our beef business abroad.
Absolutely. Again, I think if you had to put a banner on 2017 for cattle markets in a very broad sense, you'd say it's been a surprisingly strong year. And underneath that is because demand has done a lot to offset what we knew was going to be a bigger supply situation. And that demand has been not only in the domestic market, where I think demand has been pretty good, but in this export market. In the month of September, which was the latest data that we got, exports were up 14%. For the year to date, they're up about 14.5%. Well, in fact, on a year-to-date basis, they're up in all of our major export markets to varying degrees. And so we're seeing pretty consistent benefit here and boost in that total demand picture from these beef exports.
And what's happening in China, bringing that up because there was an announcement that a major Chinese retailer signed a deal with cattle producers out of Montana looking to bring in quite a volume of beef from that source over the next 3 years. And one wonders and certainly hopes that this may be the tip of the iceberg in regard to Chinese interest in U.S. beef.
Well, that's right. We're in the early stages of this rather recent access that we have to the Chinese market. There's certainly tremendous potential there. These kinds of announcements are a good sign that we're going to realize growth in that market. I still think it takes a little bit of time, partly because, there are restrictions on the access that we have in terms of the kinds of cattle that qualify or the kinds of meat that qualifies, and that has implications all the way down to the production system in terms of not using implants and beta agonists and things like that. So I think the supply constraints will moderate how fast it can grow, but these kinds of announcements are very positive in terms of the potential going forward and the interest that's there for this to be a significant. I think there's tremendous potential for China to become one of our top export markets, not quickly necessarily, but certainly in the next 3 to 5 years.
Now, not to throw a damper on things, but we do have to acknowledge as well this continuing anxiousness over what will become of the North American Free Trade Agreement, and if the U.S. is in fact on the precipice of withdrawing from NAFTA. Your latest thoughts on that, and it's well expressed by many, including yourself, that this could harm the U.S. cattle sector if in fact we drop NAFTA on this id.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. From the beef industry in particular, NAFTA has been quite beneficial for us. We have as good a conditions as you have. There's really nothing to improve in terms of renegotiating NAFTA from a beef industry perspective. And so the attitude all along, of course, has been that we do this process, and whatever we try to fix on other areas, let's make sure we don't mess this up. Politics is impossible to predict, but it looks to me like there's certainly a credible risk here that we do pull out of NAFTA, and that would not be good for the beef industry. Now the one thing that has changed over the course of NAFTA is that we have a very integrated trade system, particularly with respect to Mexico. When NAFTA was negotiated, really we imported Mexican feeder cattle as we have done for 100 years, and that was the majority of the trade. It was later in the 90s when Mexico became a significant buyer of U.S. beef, and so they became a major export market. And then more recently, they've become a significant exporter of beef from Mexico, and much of that comes into the U.S. So we have this integrated bilateral situation, which is much like what we've had with Canada for quite a number of years. And so the impacts could be very broad-based across all of those trade flows. And the net effect, again, it's not clear what it would be, but it would certainly be negative.
Stay tuned. And just finishing up with this, as a matter of fact, you are heading this week to Mexico on behalf of Oklahoma State University, and you may have a chance to make some firsthand observations from that end of the NAFTA spectrum.
I'm looking forward to the opportunity to be back down there. I have a lot of colleagues that I've worked with down there. I will be in Chihuahua, which is in the middle of a major beef-producing area. So, yes, we will certainly be looking at all of these kinds of issues, as well as getting a feel for the conditions in Mexico right now as it pertains to the cattle industry.
Well, when we visit again here in a few weeks, we'll tap you for some of those things that were being expressed down south of the border in regard to our trade with that country. And we always appreciate your input on the markets, Derrell. Good travels, and we'll talk again soon.
Very good. Talk to you soon.
He is Derrell Peel out of Oklahoma State University, livestock economist there, and visiting with us about the current cattle trading trends. Here on Agriculture Today. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. Welcome back. You're tuned to Agriculture Today. And now an update on a particular aspect of meat science research here at Kansas State University that's been ongoing. It ties into this growing public interest in omega-3 content in food. Explaining further is John Gonzalez. John is a meat scientist at K-State, and he's brought along with him a graduate researcher that's been working with him on this project, Stephanie Davis. Well, John, first of all, omega-3, you might bring it back to the basics and explain why that has become such a topic of discussion among consumers lately.
Yeah. If you look at a lot of products and how they're marketed in the market today, you'll see that there's special advertisements every now and then that products are fortified with omega-3 fatty acids. And a lot of that stems back to research demonstrating that omega-3 fatty acids provide many health benefits, including reduction in cancer, reduction in cardiovascular disease, and also a reduction in type 2 diabetes. And so as meat scientists or even animal scientists, there's been a lot of research in beef and pork to try to increase the amount of omega-3s as an additional source. Because usually you can get these from fish products, but of course Americans, and especially Midwesterners, don't eat a lot of fish-type products. So, beef and pork naturally are our next alternatives to increase the omega-3s in our diet. And we've tried stuff such as microalgae, fish meal, flaxseed, and also the product that we'll talk about today.
Let's get into that in a moment, but usually introducing a higher level of omega-3 fatty acid has been, it's been thought of anyway, to bring it in via the feed stuff that the animal uses. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's what you feed. In this case, the pig, and what's available will be deposited into the fat, and hopefully that'll be transferred on into the consumer.
Well, let's dig right into that. Actually, you and Stephanie were brought in to conduct an independent analysis of an idea that's already out there and being tried out as a way of bolstering omega-3 fatty acid content in pork, correct?
Yes, sir. What happened was we were approached by, I guess, a combination company or two companies together, Omega-3 Family Farms, who's actually the company that markets these products. And they market beef, they market pork, and they also market milk and cheese products. And then working with them was XFE Products, who sells the feed additive that actually the animals eat that will increase the omega-3 content in their diets.
And what exactly is that feed additive?
So the feed additive is called Lipex, a composition of whole canola seed, whole flaxseed, canola meal, and field peas. And what it is a heat-patented treatment that increases or encapsulates the omega-3s in the diet with starch. And so what that does is that will allow, from what I understand, when they extrude the product, there's a lot of heat there, and that can actually break down the amount of omega-3s in the diet and reduce that content. So what they do is encapsulate it with the starch, and then that improves the availability to the animal.
So your mission here was to put this to work and to see if it, in fact, is providing the omega-3 boost that's looked for here without adversely affecting the product itself.
Yes, because usually when you increase the amount of polyunsaturated fats, which omega-3s are, in the actual lean tissue or the fat of the meat product, you have two things occur that's negative in, I guess, meat marketing and meat palatability. The first is you'll reduce the color stability or the shelf life of the product, so it'll turn brown faster, and that's what consumers don't like. Color is one of the most important factors that consumers will look at when they determine at the grocery store if they want to buy a product, because they use it to determine wholesomeness. The second thing that happens negatively when you increase omega-3s or polyunsaturated fats in the diet, or in the meat, is you get an increase in the amount of off flavors. And usually that's an oxidative or a rancid type off flavor. And so that's a bad part. If you can get the color and have the great color and then have the consumer take it home and eat it, and if it has that off flavor, that's pretty much one of the three most important attributes of meat palatability. So you're injuring yourself there by having that occur. And so when you increase those two usually are negatively affected.
And then the third parameter here was, in fact, the omega-3 content that you were looking at.
Yes, sir.
Let's bring Stephanie in here for her part of this study, largely had to do with the color stability and the shelf life of the product. How did you go about gauging that?
So what we first used was, it's an instrument we call the mini scan. You scan the meat in several areas, and it will be able to tell us how dark the meat is, how red it is. Also, we can see discoloration with that machine, so that's something we were looking at every day, as well as we use trained panelists. So we had graduate students and professors come in, and they would also look at the meat, and they would say exactly how they thought it was looking. So with our instrument, we could look at certain values of the meat. We would look at how light or dark the meat was getting, as well as how red. And so what we saw was there was no treatment effect. All treatments acted the same, and they did get a little bit darker over time, as well as there was no treatment effect with the redness of the meat, where they did get a little bit less red over time. And then we would also look at the amount of surface discoloration. Again, we saw no treatment effect with that, so feeding them this product did not cause them to get brown quicker. Brown over time, but at a normal rate, like we would see with any other type of meat. And then with our panelists, we would look at the redness and the amount of surface discoloration. Again, we did not see a treatment effect with the redness, and our panelists actually saw similar to what our machine did, to where they got a little bit less red over time, as well as they did get more discolored over time. But again, there was no treatment effect, so no differences between our controls and our treatment groups.
So the color of the product seems to not be an issue, and that translates pretty directly then into shelf life.
Correct.
Where very little difference was seen there as well.
Correct. So we just did not see any detrimental effects of this product to the meat color at all.
What about the palatability question, though, John?
Okay, so what we ended up doing was testing the product and its overall palatability using our trained panel here at K-State with and Dr. Travis O'Quinn's sensory lab. And what we ended up finding out is, unlike what we expected was going to happen, or opposite of what we expected was going to happen, there was no effect on the juiciness of the product. There was no effect on the sustained juiciness of the product, myofibular tenderness, connective tissue amount, overall tenderness. But what was really the most important, the two important attributes that we noticed was there was no effect on the pork flavor that we experienced, and also the amount of off flavors, because as I said earlier, we would have expected to have an increase in off flavor. But overall, this product and the meat that resulted from the pigs eating this product did not adversely affect palatability.
So when you look at all of that, this compound graded out well for its purpose of enhancing omega-3 content in the pork cut and product.
Yeah, so we did measure. So when the loin came back, we did take a chop and measure it for the omega-3 and the omega-6 content. When we measured the omega-3 content, we did get a 178% increase in the amount of omega-3s in the product. We also did get an increase of omega-6 by 54%. More importantly, as we talked about earlier, when you look at the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, normally in what I've been reading in the literature and on the internet is that there's usually our normal diet right now in America is around 15 for that ratio. But what we ended up doing when the product was fed was it dropped the ratio from around a 9 for this product all the way down to a 5.48. So we actually improved the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio by feeding pigs the Lipex product.
So one would have to say that this product is, in fact, making the grade in as far as its intent for improving omega-3 content while preserving product quality at the same time.
Yes, sir. Yes, it does improve the omega-3 content, which is good for marketing claims or if you're looking for a more healthful product. And it also, for the retailer, they're not having to discount the product because of color. They're not having to sell it cheaper because of color. Because we've seen in previous research that you can knock off, at least in beef, 3 to 4 days by having increased omega-3 content.
So as you look at it from the scientific perspective, does this confirmation of this particular compound maybe open the way for further advances in this area?
Yes, I believe this is a unique way of increasing omega-3 content. People are always trying to find a way to get the most omega-3s packed into their meat product. Mm-hmm. And so this is a unique one from the standpoint of you can do it. You don't have to up the vitamin E level or any antioxidants, and make the cost of the diet any more expensive than it needs to be, because you don't have to worry about those negative effects. So it's a pretty interesting study from that standpoint, and very interesting result because you're increasing those omega-3s and not having the negative effects there.
It's interesting work, to be sure, and we'll see where this goes from here. But again, it may be an avenue to introducing omega-3 fatty acids at a higher level in a practical sense in common meat cuts, in this case in pork, as per your study. So we appreciate the report on this, John and Stephanie, and thank you for coming over.
Thank you.
Thank you.
From the Meat Science Laboratories at K-State, researchers John Gonzalez and Stephanie Davis. And once more, they were looking at this commercial product that's out there now that may in fact be one avenue of enhancing omega-3 content in meat cuts. And once more, pork was at the center of this particular study out of K-State. You're listening to Agriculture Today, and we'll be back shortly on this, the K-State Radio Network.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
This is the K-State Radio Network, and you're listening to Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Now for you today's agricultural news headlines in brief, courtesy in part of DTN. Russia says it wants to import up to 300,000 metric tons of beef per year from Mexico as the two countries strengthen bilateral trade in farm goods. Officials from Mexico and Russia have held a series of meetings in recent weeks that aim to smooth the way for closer trade ties. On the Mexican side, the government is seeking access to the Russian market not only for beef, but also for poultry and dairy products. In turn, the Russians see Mexico as a potential buyer of fertilizers, wheat, and agricultural machinery. The rationale for closer trade ties is strategic as well as economic. Mexico is keen to diversify its markets. Given the uncertainty over relations with the U.S., there's still debate as to whether the U.S. will exit NAFTA. Agriculture groups on both sides concerned that this could negatively impact trade. Now, on Friday, the World Trade Organization ruled in favor of the U.S. in a dispute with Indonesia over its complex import requirements for beef and beef products. The WTO report found that all 18 of Indonesia's import measures challenged by the U.S. were inconsistent with WTO rules and obligations. The ruling marks the end of the WTO dispute settlement process and is expected to open up significant new export opportunities for U.S. beef in the Indonesian market. U.S. Meat Export Federation CEO Phil Singh said he's extremely pleased with the outcome of this case. Singh said that the Federation sees Indonesia as a very promising market for the future. It's the fourth most populous country in the world, but with per capita beef consumption of only 3.5 kilograms, Indonesia has almost unlimited potential, he says, to become one of the world's largest beef importing countries. Now, last year, U.S. beef and beef variety meats exports to Indonesia were 10,000 metric tons valued at $39 million, making it our 9th largest export market by volume and 15th largest by value. Through September of this year, exports to Indonesia were just shy of 10,000 metric tons valued at $36 million. That marked a 96% increase from the first 9 months of 2016 in volume and a 78% increase in value. New government policy recently set a target to roll out the use of ethanol in gasoline nationwide in China, according to a plan jointly released by 15 Chinese ministries. To meet its goals of implementing 10% ethanol nationwide by the year 2020, China would need to import ethanol, at least in the short term. AgriMoney reported comments last week from Juan Luciano, the CEO of ADM, anticipating that China would need to import roughly 254 million gallons of ethanol annually. Reuters reported last week that China plans to build an ethanol plant in the Heilongjiang province that would produce about 127 million gallons, up to 159 million of ethanol annually. That facility would use about 1.8 million metric tons of corn. That's about 728 million bushels annually. This new policy is to let all 31 provinces, autonomy regions, and municipal cities use E10. So far, ethanol-added gasoline only available in 11 provinces. There are 205 million cars in China consuming 3.8 billion gallons of gasoline annually. With 10% ethanol added, that country would open a biofuel ethanol market of 380 million gallons, not considering the increase of gasoline consumption in the following years. With a corn ethanol production rate of 3-to-1, the ethanol industry in China would need to use 36 million tons of corn, or about 1.4 billion bushels. Want to remind you once again that K-State's annual Swine Day is coming up later this week, Thursday the 16th. It'll feature updates on more than 50 research projects that have been conducted this past year. There's still opportunity to register. The fee for Swine Day, $35 from now until at the door. Registration is available at ksuswine.org, by the way. The event will kick off with the Technology Trade Show at 8 in the morning on Thursday. This at the K-State Alumni Center. The full program there at 9:30, and then lunch lunch and wrapping up with a reception at 4 o'clock with Call Hall ice cream. During the morning session, faculty from the university's swine team will update everyone on key results from more than 50 experiments that have been conducted in the last year, and researchers from the College of Veterinary Medicine will provide a similar research update on current and emerging diseases, that in the afternoon. Also on the program, the U.S. Territory Manager for JYGA Technologies, Hyatt Frobose, will share lessons he's learned from helping producers meet consumer mandates to adopt loose housing systems for gestating sows. You can register by calling Lois at K-State, 785-532-1267, 785-532-1267. And once more, you can look into all of this at ksuswine.org. But swine producers, be there for the annual Swine Day this Thursday, the 16th, at the K-State Alumni Center toward the south end of the campus. Next up, this week's edition of Tree Tales. Standing by with that is K-State Forester Charlie Barden. Charlie?
If you are thinking about using wood to heat your home, there are several things to consider. First, check with your homeowner's insurance to see if there will be a premium increase and to get the current specifications for safe installation of wood-burning heaters. Follow these directions closely for your own safety and to make sure your insurance is not voided by a poorly installed stove. Wood stoves have been greatly improved in recent years and are a far cry from yesteryear's black potbelly or simple box stoves. Most are airtight, which means you can adjust the draft and control the rate at which the wood is burned. A removable ash drawer allows you to empty accumulated ashes without having to let the fire go out completely, which is a great help in cold weather. Some of the most advanced stoves even have catalytic converters, which helps ignite unburned gases escaping the fire, thus producing more heat and less air pollution. The most sophisticated are the pellet stoves, which need to be loaded just once a day and can use an auger to feed the firebox according to how much heat is needed. However, pellet stoves also need to have electricity to operate the auger and the fan, so they cannot be used as supplemental heat during power outages. Operating a wood stove is definitely more work than adjusting your thermostat of your furnace, but many homeowners see the operation of a wood stove as a satisfying hobby that they enjoy. Activities associated with wood burning include cutting and splitting the wood, carrying it inside, starting and stoking the fire, and removing the ashes. With the high cost of propane and electricity, this hobby can also save you money on your heating bill. When selecting a wood stove, some important questions to ask yourself are, will this be the primary or supplemental source of heat? How big of an area will be heated? Are aesthetics or efficiency most important? The answers to these questions will help guide your purchase. You've been listening to Tree Tales. I'm Charles Barden, Forester with K-State Research and Extension.
Thanks, Charlie. Our weekly 4-H segment is next on Agriculture Today.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
Time now on Agriculture Today for our weekly 4-H segment, and we'll return to the support program for local 4-H initiatives called the 4-H Expansion Grant. It's been very active here in the state of Kansas in recent years. We have another example for you here, what's been going on in Dickinson County, north central Kansas. We happen to have on the line now the Dickinson County Research and Extension 4-H agent, Jill Martinson. You might give us a bit of an overview, though, Jill, of the expansion grant idea before we talk more about how you've implemented it in Dickinson County.
Yes, no problem. The expansion grant has given counties the opportunity to work with the Kansas Leadership Center and to kind of look at the model that they approach with looking at community issues, specifically how we could expand our 4-H programs and maybe think about them a little bit differently. And so Dickinson County was able to take advantage of that opportunity in forming a business plan for how we would like to grow our 4-H program here in the county, and maybe to also recognize some opportunities that we might not have been taking advantage of previously.
So as you came up with that business plan, what inspirations resulted from that?
Right. We had several ideas of different spin clubs or special interest clubs that we might want to pursue. Some volunteers that we were able to target that we thought might be interested in leading those initiatives. And we also took a definite approach to encourage our older members to stay involved in the program. That's one of the hallmarks of the Dickinson County program, is that we really work to keep our older members engaged, because we know that they have grown so much through the 4-H program that we don't want to lose their leadership and the skills that they've gained as they become, middle and high schoolers who are able to really share with our younger 4-H members.
The spin clubs, we have visited with specialists about those before, but the notion here is for those clubs to concentrate on a particular area of interest, correct?
Right. And so in Dickinson County, we had volunteers that wanted to look at specific things, and in several of these, the volunteers actually came to us. One of them is with our Brown's Busy Beekeepers, and this is a group of young people who meet they actually maintain 2 hives of bees that are out at Brown Memorial Home. There's an orchard area there and an area that they felt was really accessible for beekeeping and that would be benefited there in the park area through bees being kept in the area. That program is actually 3 years old now, with those members maintaining those beehives and learning more about beekeeping in that public area. That one's really interesting because the residents of Brown's home also became really engaged in being part of that group. So it's a youth group, but it also has some members who are in their 70s and 80s and even 90s.
So that's really a unique development that occurred from that spin club. You've 3 others in the county, though, you say. What are the themes of those?
Yeah, we have the local vet who was interested in doing a vet science program, and Dr. Becky Rankin, and she's done a really great job of having monthly meetings where the kids do really hands-on experiences there at the vet clinic. So, thinking about things that they could really be engaged with and learn about. So, they're looking through microscopes, they're working with animals, they're doing the things that real vets do every day. We also have a 4-H'er who has been really involved with community service projects that benefit others through fiber arts. So she has started a 5th H, and the 5th H is hope. And those projects are things that the kids make kind of in mass to help benefit others, such as chemo caps. They've done little dresses for Africa. They've done comfort bears, but things that the kids can be engaged in creating for someone else that will really provide a benefit. And then our most recent one is developing a community garden in Harrington. We have a well-established Extension and City of Abilene partnership garden in Abilene, but then the Harrington garden is something new, and that's been done in cooperation with the Harrington School District and the Harrington High School FFA chapter.
So you have a whole lot going on within the 4-H Spin Club initiative in Dickinson County. What's been, Jill, the general receptiveness here? How have local youth responded?
I think that it's been very well received, and what we've done is we've said, these are open to any youth in the county. You don't have to be a community club member, but you can be a community club member. So we've kind of included everyone in being able to be a part of the spin clubs, and so it's just been seen as a really neat opportunity to focus on something that kids are interested in.
Excellent. You mentioned the other phase earlier, and that is the attempt to retain the older 4-H'er within the 4-H activities, and we all know that as those youth get older, their time is tugged at from many, many different directions. So you're trying to play up the leadership theme in fact, re-engaging those older 4-H'ers, correct?
Yes, absolutely. We have a countywide leadership squad, and they're a group that named themselves. They're the Super Qualified United Ambassadors of Dickinson County, and they have 2 responsibilities. One is to gain and work on leadership skills, and the second is to promote the 4-H program. So rather than having an ambassador program, these kids are really engaged in doing both things, both learning and practicing leadership and marketing the 4-H program throughout the county. And they're a self-selected group. They decide whether or not they would like to participate, and they've been really active and really fantastic about getting lots of things done in the community. They're a really enthusiastic group. It's a meeting that if you're going to attend, you need to be ready to actively listen because there's a million conversations going on at one time. So our leadership squad has been one thing. We also have an active interstate exchange group, And we try to give our older 4-Hers as much responsibility as we can, as far as being assistant superintendents at the fair, being project leaders and supporting them in that kind of work, so that they're really engaged and active in what they're doing, including being camp counselors, which for a lot of them is a highlight of the entire 4-H year.
So all in all, the expansion grant concept has become well-rooted in Dickinson County, it sounds, and is meeting with the level of success that you had hoped, Jill.
Yeah, and the things that have developed over the 3 years of the grant process have really given us things that we are able to sustain beyond those grant awards, so that we can continue those efforts for the kids in the county.
Jill, congratulations on implementing all of this and to a positive end, these various activities under the Expansion Grant Program. We appreciate the quick overview right here. Many thanks.
Thank you.
She is the Research and Extension 4-H agent in Dickinson County. That's Jill Martinson. That is this week's Kansas 4-H segment. And with that, our time is away for today. We'll be back this same time tomorrow and invite you to rejoin us then. Meantime, a good day to you. Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.